New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio coming down against the grand jury's decision not to indict an NYPD officer yesterday, suggesting that race played a big role in the so-called Chokehold case. Watch this.
There are so many families in this city who feel that each and every night. Is my child safe? And not just from some of the painful reality of crime and violence in some of our neighborhoods, but are they safe from the very people they want to have faith in as their protectors? We're not just dealing with a problem in 2014. We're not dealing with years of racism leading up to it or decades of racism. We are dealing with centuries of racism that have brought us to this day. That is how profound the crisis is.
Wow, what a statement there from the mayor. Kevin Jackson is the executive director of the Black Sphere and the author of Race Pimping, the multi-trillion-dollar business of liberalism. Leslie Marshall is a syndicated radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor. Welcome to both of you. Obviously, a very significant moment in all of this, a decision that surprised a lot of people. But is it all due, Kevin, to what the mayor calls centuries of racism?
Absolutely not. De Blasio could not be more wrong. You know what it has to do with is the decades that the Democrats have been in charge of these urban indoctrination centers known as cities. And in this particular case, if this man had been white, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. De Blasio has presided over the death of many, many black people in his city, and he's not said a word. And all the Democrat and independents that have run that city up to this point have not said a word about these deaths. And to condemn the cops over this, look, I understand that this man died, but it was a very simple solution to all of this. He could have just said, okay, take me in and let's get it handled. I'm not trying to minimize it, and I think that the process needs to be looked at. But to make this racial and to go back centuries is patently ridiculous.
All right, let's listen to Charles Krauthammer from last night on Special Report.
From looking at the video, the grand jury's decision here is totally incomprehensible. It looks as if at least they might have indicted him on something like involuntary manslaughter at the very least. The guy actually said, I can't breathe, which ought to be a signal that, and the guy was unarmed, and the crime was as petty as they come.
Charles's reaction was shared by a lot of people, a lot of legal experts as well, Leslie, who looked at it and said, well, you know, if there's a very low bar generally for indictment to go to a trial in this case. What are your thoughts?
I have to say, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. It's very clear. My understanding on my talk show yesterday, talked to a number of law enforcement officials regarding chokeholds and the various types of chokeholds. But if somebody's screaming, I can't breathe, and you have 4 officers and the man's on the ground, he is then in fact subdued. He did not have a weapon. He does not have a history of violent crime, and selling loosies 1 cigarette at a time on the street is certainly not violent. But to the point of race, the bottom line here is the statistics are overwhelming with the amount of racial profiling, not just toward African Americans in this country. The issue is, and I am a white woman, I do not have this plight, that if a black man is walking in my neighborhood, he might be stopped and questioned as to why he is there. And that is wrong, and that is a violation of an individual's civil rights. And the Justice Department needs to look into things like this as it is.
All right, let's listen. I think you want to respond, Kevin. Go ahead.
Well, you know, they always go back to these statistics about this or that. The statistics are based on reality. They're based on the idea that the crime happens with, unfortunately, young black men. And Leslie and people like her always go back to that. Look, there's another profiling that happens in black neighborhoods. It's called the profiling of police. When police come, they're not there to help. They don't help police. They look at police as the enemy. Has anybody talked about that level of profiling?
Leslie, it's a good question.
I think that these types of incidents play into that heavily. And this is exactly what we're talking about. Regardless of skin color in this country, I think we all agree that there is a divide. It's become us and them between the police and minorities, specifically African American communities in our country. And the only way that's going to stop is if people do stop and think. If a cop says, put your hands up, put your hands up. But if somebody says you can't breathe, release your arms from his neck.
Well, you know, the grand jury looked at all of this evidence, and they came away with no indictment. And we're going to get more into this later. You know, but and obviously there's a lot of evidence to look at in this case. Everybody has looked at this video. But I also want to play one more soundbite from you, because this is from a man who has a tremendous amount of experience in really turning around New York City from the depths of one of its worst crime spans in many, many years. Let's listen to Rudy Giuliani, and he's reacting to the president saying that, you know, there needs to be more training for police, and he kind of spins off of that. Listen to this.
If he wants to train young black men in how to avoid being killed in the city, you can talk about police. No, police should never kill anybody unjustifiably. Right. I've put them in jail when that happens. But you should spend 90% of your time talking about the way they're actually probably going to get killed, which is by another black. To avoid that fact, I think, is racist.
Is he right about that, Kevin?
Yeah, he's absolutely right. You know, again, we can go back to the social decline and the things leading to that. The other thing that I think that we should be talking about is, I mean, in terms of Rudy nailing this, because I think what happens is we tend to overlook that, and it isn't that blacks are bad. It isn't that we've got some problem, you know, that there's something with us in terms of our DNA. What it has to do with the situation that we've been put in. And Rudy's right in that we need to be having these types of discussions and not running from it. And what happens is we end up going back to statistics, and I know that's where Leslie will probably head.
You know, I mean...
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you there. I wasn't going to go to statistics. I think they're very different situations. The police are there to prevent the crime, whether it is black on black, black on white, white on black. The color there certainly should be irrelevant. The color blue is there to assist the community to serve and protect. Black on black crime is statistically a reality, is a reality. But police have to be there to protect those individuals from the criminals, regardless of color, and not make an assumption that based on someone's color that they may just be a criminal because they have a black face.
All right, we're going to leave it there.
They do that every day, Leslie. They do that every day. They go into these communities. They protect people of color every single day. And the problem is when something like this occurs, we get the race pimps out talking about, oh, this was done because he was black. The police very well could have handled this differently. There's no question about that. But it wasn't because he was black. It isn't some targeting of blacks.
We'd like to be able to have these conversations and not mention the color of either person, because that's what it really comes down to, is the evidence and what happened in the case. That's what this grand jury dealt with, and a lot of people are surprised with what they found. But we need to continue to dig into it and get more information. Kevin, thank you. Leslie, thank you very much. Good to talk to you both.
Thank you.